My Best Friends Live in the Woods. The Adventures of Albert by Michelle Mracek. Chapter 29. Co-Creation. The next morning arrived with a cool, misty rain and overcast sky. The normal blush of pink sunrise covered over by a blanket of gray drifting clouds. Mother Skunk woke up chilly. She reached for the woven blanket in the box on the floor to the left of her chair and pulled it up over her. The warmth was soothing as she tucked it in around her. Just a few more minutes, she thought as she gazed out the window at the drizzle. She wanted a cup of hot tea, but that would require her to move, so she did without. She must have drifted back to sleep because the next thing she knew, Abigail was standing at the hearth. There was a little fire going, and Albert was stirring a pot of porridge. The aroma of porridge and mint tea was probably what woke her. Noticing she was awake, Abigail poured a cup of mint tea and offered it to Mother Skunk. "Good morning, Mama," she smiled as Mother Skunk took the cup. "Oh, thank you, dear. This is just what I wanted," she said as she held the mug up close to her face to feel the warm steam rising. She pressed the mug against her chest just under her chin and enjoyed the warmth and fragrance. "Is everyone up?" she asked. "No, just me and Albert and Bluebell. We thought we would get breakfast going," Abigail said just over a whisper. Bluebell had agreed it was a fine idea to choose a sibling or two to join her with each daily task and had wiggled Abigail and Albert's toes to wake them when she got up. Bluebell walked in and sat on the floor in front of her mother. "So now what?" she said, pointing out the window at the rain. "I doubt the fitting will happen with this weather," she added, disappointed. "Well, if not today, maybe tomorrow," Mother Skunk smiled at her oldest daughter. "For now, let's enjoy the fire." Bluebell nodded and turned around to face the hearth, scooting back so her shoulders leaned back on Mama's knees. They sat together in silence, listening to the flickering of the flames as they danced above the log. Albert smiled at the two, cuddled up. "I always wonder what they are saying," he mused. "Who?" Bluebell asked. "The flames," Albert answered. "It always seems like the spirit of the fire has a language just beyond my understanding." Abigail shook her head. "Only you would say that," she teased her brother. "The porridge is almost ready. Should I get the others up?" Albert asked Mother Skunk. "No, the porridge will wait. Let them sleep in. That's what rainy mornings are for," she smiled. "Sometimes the wisest thing is to do nothing. Be still and breathe deeply. Be in the moment. Just be present," Mother Skunk told her children. After a bit, Abigail asked, "Where did you get that blanket?" Mother Skunk smiled with a memory. "This was a wedding gift. All my friends gave me a wedding blessings party. They each came with strips of cloth or yarn and wove this at the party. It took all day. We talked and laughed and kept our hands busy until sunset. No one left until they had created this lovely blanket. I have always treasured it." Her voice drifted off. Then she snapped back into the present and looked at Bluebell. "I will have a wedding blessing party for you when the time comes." She smiled at her daughter. Bluebell blushed. "He hasn't asked yet," she said, looking at her lap. "But he will," Albert smiled at her. "Do you think so?" Bluebell brightened, looking at Albert. Albert just nodded, grinning. They began to hear voices coming from the bedroom. At first softly, then the volume of the chatter rose. "And they're up," Mother Skunk patted her lap. "And so should I be. she said, folding her blanket as she stood. As she laid it back in the box, she gave a little pat and sighed, then turned her attention to the bedroom. "Breakfast!" she called in that direction. "Albert made you porridge." The chatter and bustle poured into the kitchen. Henry and Ricky began passing out bowls. "Line up, Albert will serve," Mother Skunk directed. Bluebell kept glancing out the window, hoping to see the clouds lifting, but so far the drizzle persisted. She had been so excited for the fitting, it had been hard to fall asleep. The disappointment was proving hard to manage. "It's just rain," Mother Skunk patted her shoulder. "All sunshine makes a desert," she teased. Bluebell sighed. Presently there was a knock at the front door. "Who could that be out in the rain?" Mother Skunk said as she started to the door. "I'll get it," Nicholas offered and pulled the door open. He gazed out at the familiar front yard and saw no one there. He shut the door and shrugged. Then again, a knock at the door was louder this time and faster. "What the heck?" Nicholas said and opened the door once more. He still saw no one, but then he heard a little voice shouting, "Down here!" He looked down to see Chitty Witty on the front doormat, jumping up and down, waving his arms over his head. "It's me, Chitty Witty!" he called up to Nicholas. "I need to see Mother Skunk. It's an emergency!" Nicholas opened the door wider and stepped back, motioning for the little chipmunk to enter. Not wasting a moment, Chitty Witty scampered into the kitchen. Mother Skunk was sitting at the table. The desperate little chipmunk crawled right up her apron and onto her lap. "My mother needs help!" he exclaimed, waving his arms. "My, how you have grown up!" Mother Skunk stammered. "I hardly recognized you." "Now, what is wrong?" she asked. "My mother needs help! Come quickly!" "Yes, of course," Mother Skunk replied quite seriously, looking down at the little guy on her lap. "What has happened?" she asked. "I don't know. What is wrong with her?" he gasped. "Her belly has been getting bigger and bigger, and then this morning she started crying out in pain and grabbing her giant belly." He was in a panic. "Come quickly," he repeated. Mother Skunk nodded, a knowing smile spreading across her face. "Bluebell, put the wild lettuce and blue cohosh in a basket with towels. Marigold and Layla and Bluebell, come with me. Abigail, you are in charge here. If anyone comes from the Great Glen, tell them we are gone to Mrs. Chipmunk's for a delivery." Abigail nodded as her sisters scurried to fill the basket. Then she looked down at Chitty Witty. "Your mama isn't sick. She is going to deliver a baby. Soon you will be a big brother. I think it would be faster if we carried you. Do you think you could point the way?" Her smile was reassuring, and poor little Chitty Witty began to feel better. "I knew you would know what to do," he smiled at her. "Yes, I can point the way," he said proudly. "Albert, can you please carry Chitty Witty and lead the way?" Mother called across the room. Albert rushed up and helped Chitty Witty up onto his shoulder. "Just talk in my ear and tell me which way to go," Albert instructed his little passenger. "Weren't you the one who was lost?" Albert asked as they stepped out the door and into the drizzle. "Yes, but that was quite a while ago. It was so terrible to be lost. I vowed to make it my life's calling to know where everything in the forest is located. I've been mapping and memorizing the forest ever since. Now, straight up the hill and head toward the stream," he instructed, and Albert hurried off, leading the little group. The chipmunk's nest was just up the hill on the opposite side of the stream. As they approached, Albert set Chitty Witty down. When his feet hit the ground, he ran as fast as his little legs would carry him to the nest. "Mama, Mama, I brought help!" he cried out. Mrs. Chipmunk was laying on her side, panting and groaning. "Okay, girls, do as I instruct you. Boys, why don't you take these towels to the stream and get them wet and cool and bring them back to me?" Mother Skunk was all business and then focused on Mrs. Chipmunk. She took her hand and patted it. "It will be all right," she said soothingly. "Here, drink this." She put the bottle of wild lettuce tincture to her lips. "It will ease the pain." "Thank you," was all Mrs. Chipmunk could manage, but her grateful eyes said it all. Just then, Mr. Chipmunk came bounding up. He had been running so hard he was gasping for air. He ran right to his wife and bent his head down to press his lips against her forehead. "I found yarrow," he said to both his wife and Mother Skunk as he held up a large bundle of herbs. "Perfect!" Mother Skunk was quite pleased with his gift. "But we will save that for after the birth. Right now, you need to eat the blue cohosh. Can you manage it?" she asked Mrs. Chipmunk. "We are all active participants in the fertility of Mother Earth, co-creators of life with all its hopes and dreams and possibilities. The herbs are wise, as their great source of power is the life force within them. Just focus on the miracle of seeing your babies' faces." Mother Skunk was stroking her head. As the girls assisted and the boys paced, the drizzle began to give way to parting clouds. "It's a girl!" Mother Skunk shouted at long last. "And another girl! And a boy!" she cheered. "Congratulations! Now you are the papa of triplets!" she called to Mr. Chipmunk. Shafts of sunlight began to stream through the clearing sky, still heavy with the mists of the morning. "Look for the rainbow!" Albert pointed to the sky. Sure enough, right on cue, the droplets began to reveal the arch of color over the forest. "The great creators promise that the world should continue." Mr. Chipmunk pointed to the bow of colors in the sky. "And that our family will grow," Mrs. Chipmunk said as she munched on the yarrow he had brought her. As she stood to leave, Mother Skunk smiled lovingly at the sight of the little family now cuddled in together. Chitty Witty holding a sister, while the other sister and brother were wrapped in close on either side of their mother. Mr. Chipmunk looked at Mother Skunk and said most sincerely, "Thank you. I would like to name a daughter after you. What is your name?" "It's Matilda," Mother Skunk smiled back. "Okay then, how about Tilly?" he asked his wife, and she nodded in agreement. "And I would like to name the others Daisy Bell, after Bluebell, and Bert, after Albert." She grinned, and he nodded. "We are so honored," Mother Skunk said, truly pleased. "Now, rest." She smiled and motioned for her children to follow her back home. "What a morning!" she exclaimed as they walked back down the hill toward the stream. Marigold and Layla were not nearly as cheerful as Mother, Bluebell, and Albert. "What makes you so grumpy?" Mother Skunk asked. "We didn't get a baby named after us," they said, disappointed. "Well, maybe that will be up to me someday," Bluebell smiled at her sisters. As they got to the stream, Mother Skunk waded in and waved to the others to follow. "Let's wash up," she instructed. "Perhaps we will get the fitting in today after all," she said, glancing up at the sky. "Oh, I do hope so," Bluebell fretted. Mother Skunk studied Bluebell's anxious face. "You know, Rain will fall into every life. Look to its blessings and accept its teachings. Be resigned to the things you cannot change. Work very hard to co-create your reality in the things you do have influence over. Your mind and emotions and intentions, when focused, can create a lovely life in the world. But some things we cannot change. The trick is to tell the difference. Mother Skunk felt it increasingly necessary to speak wisdom to her daughter, sensing her chances to instruct were numbered. Bluebell took a long, slow breath. That's better, Mother smiled. Marigold and Layla had been listening too, and exchanged glances and nodded. Albert began splashing water on the girls and laughing. Look, sunshine! We better hurry back. A few more giggles and splashes, and they were wading across the other side and headed toward home. The morning chill was long gone, and the warm sunshine was welcome as their fur dried. I guess the door wreath won't get made today, Mother said as they got closer. There's always tomorrow, Bluebell smiled. Sometimes life has other plans, Mother nodded in agreement. As they opened the door, Abigail was sitting in Mother's chair, her siblings gathered on the floor around her. She was animatedly waving her hands as she told an exciting story. They didn't even notice the others had come in until the sound of the door thumping shut turned their heads. They all jumped up and ran to gather around them. What happened? Is she okay? Did she have the baby? Questions flew from all sides. Mother Skunk waved them to calm down. All is well, Mother Skunk smiled. I am going to rest for a while. I'll let the others tell the details, she said as she shuffled to her chair by the hearth. And tell it they did in great detail as the others gasped and more questions flew. Presently, Bluebell was standing in front of Mother Skunk, holding out a mug of hot mint tea. Thank you, Mother said as she accepted her offering. You were amazing this morning, Bluebell said, sitting once again on the floor in front of her mother. How did you know what to do? She asked. By helping my mother at lots of other deliveries, of course, she said. Just then, a flutter of wings and a peck turned their heads to see Tidal bobbing at the window. Don't get too comfortable, Mother Skunk grinned. Ricky opened the door and Tidal flew in. The Queen says, come to the Great Glen for the fitting. Tidal paced and bobbed his head. Everyone was silent. Tidal opened his wings. Now, he chirped. There was a sudden burst of laughter, and the excited clan scampered out the door. Let's skip, Albert shouted, and they all began the merry right, left, right bounce toward the glen. Oh, Albert, run and fetch Clara, Mother Skunk called to him. He stopped skipping and started down the hill, not needing to be asked twice. Jillian and Anthena were waiting with excited anticipation for the family to arrive. Anthena was being fitted for a darker lavender robe that was fastened around the neck with a button fashioned of polished clamshell. The shell was carved into a 5-petaled flower, and Anthena thought it was splendid. Did you see the button? She asked Jillian, beaming a huge smile. Clarissa and Matthew were giving instructions to the royal sewers. They were 6 minks, all lined up and at attention. The clamor of Mother Skunk's family approaching the Great Glen suddenly turned all heads. Clarissa beamed. They're here, she exclaimed. Meanwhile, Albert was racing to the forsythia thicket where Clara and her parents made their home. The dense branches overarched a lovely room. When it bloomed yellow in early spring, it was magical. Now the dense leaves made a shady retreat inside. Albert stood outside the door and called, "Clara, we need to hurry. Tidal called us for the fitting." It just took a moment for Clara to poke her head out, but Albert was shocked to see her face with sad eyes. "I don't think I should come," she said, her chin quivering to stifle a cry. "What? Of course you should," Albert said forcefully. "Come on, we need to hurry," he repeated. But I'm not part of your family," Clara said, turning her eyes to the ground. Albert was suddenly dumbstruck. What should he say? His mind raced. Then he got down on one knee and held his hand to her. "Clara, we are still too young to be married, but will you promise yourself to me?" "I promise myself to you." He was shocked to hear the words come out of his mouth, but he had never been more serious. Clara began to cry. More tears? Albert was so confused. "Happy tears!" She beamed and she reached out and took his hand. "Yes, I promise myself to you," she said with all the love of the universe shining in her eyes. "Good," he beamed. "Now you are family. But now we really need to run." He laughed and pulled her into a run through the forest toward the great glen. They were both red-faced and laughing when they bounded into the sunshine. They saw Mother Skunk and all her children lined up 3 or 4 deep in 6 rows, a mink seamstress presiding in front of each line. The royal sewers were always from the mink family, a long and proud tradition. They carried their tape measures as a badge of honor as they fussed and measured, the first one in each line. "Good, they're just getting started," Albert whispered to Clara as they stopped their laughter and respectfully got into a line, side by side. All Albert could think about was wanting to reach across and hold Clara's hand. When at last it was Albert's turn, he looked to Mother Deer and said, "I really don't have to get measured. I have a purple vest at home." Even so, Mother Deer smiled at him and motioned for the seamstresses to continue. When the business of measuring was over, Clarissa and Matthew stepped in front of the group. "Lunch is served," Matthew said and waved toward the opposite side of the glen. A great bowl of shelled walnuts and another of fried daylilies were being set out in the shade of a large hackberry tree. Clarissa smiled at her best friend. "Matilda, the daylilies are your favorite, right?" Owl flew down and began to announce the picnic as if it were a royal ball. "Woo-hoo! His Royal Highness and his Queen shall be seated first," he began. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Owl," Clarissa laughed. "This is family. Just join us, won't you?" She smiled warmly at Owl as his feathers puffed out. Then he suddenly stopped and looked at her with gratitude. "Ooh, family?" he repeated. "Yes, of course. You will sit next to Matthew and keep him company so Matilda and I can chat, won't you?" He grinned. Al was so happy in his heart. This is all he had really been wanting, just to be reassured that he was still considered family, just to be included and not replaced. "Yes, of course," Matthew smiled at his old friend. "Save your voice for the crowning ceremony. We need you to be in top form there," he added with a knowing glance to Clarissa. "Oh, well, yes, of course, as you wish." Al stepped in line to Matthew's left as they walked together across the glen toward the waiting picnic. "And about the crowning ceremony," Al began to chat merrily. Clarissa waved Mother Skunk to her side. "So, Matilda, how was your day?" She leaned over to her. "Oh my, where to begin?" Chapter 29, Co-Creation, Discussion and Questions, Spirit, Wisdom, Us. Many First Nation peoples believe everything is alive and has a spirit. Albert reflects this belief when he wonders what the spirit of the fire is saying. Question 1. How do you see the world? Do you believe everything has a spirit? Mother Skunk tells her children to be still, in the moment, present. In a present state, we are most creative and connected to the energy of the universe. Question 2. Do you take time daily to be still and quiet? To meditate and broaden your focus to connect with the energy of the universe? Chitty Witty comes to Mother Skunk for help. He believes she has the wisdom needed. Question 3. Are you learning about the powerful and abundant plants that heal and protect us? Albert wisely perceives Claire's distress is caused by her feeling of separation. By promising to marry her in the future, he changes her perception from one of other to us. Question 4. When you think of the people in your life, who do you include in us? Clarissa and Matthew reassure Al he is still considered family, not replaced. They wisely perceive his need to be reassured he still belongs. Question 5. Is there someone who needs your reassurance that they are included in your us? I am the composer and performer for all the music in this video. Both audio recordings and the printed scores are available on mybestfriendsliveinthe.woods.com. I will provide the link below. The painted illustrations are also my creation. Prints are available on mybestfriendsliveinthe.woods.com. This is a novel. The chapters are meant to be heard in the order in which they were written. And while each chapter can stand alone, they do build as new characters are introduced and past events are referred to. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. The chapters are numbered, so if you're just joining us, be sure to go back and watch from Chapter 1.
In a dream, in a trance, my spirit flies to the pink horizon of the forest.